Hello and welcome everyone to the continuation of the Dwarfs vs the World series with the second episode, Game Tactics. In today's episode we will discuss army setup, positioning and map considerations. This should allow you to set up and prepare your armies for certain maps, opposing factions and therefore optimal unit selection. When we are considering optimal unit selection, we must discuss which factions we're playing against and what maps are we going to be playing them on against. Once these factors have been taken into consideration, we can then decide what type of build / style we'd like to use. Now there are approximately 8 different types of builds commonly used by Dwarf players, and these are box builds, onion builds, slow push, rush builds, Vanguard builds, artillery focused builds, and also the Royal Dowie Air Force. Probably one of my favourite. So as we do go here with the Dwarfs, we have to take into consideration we are a reaction faction. Because we are so slow when we take, for example, Longbeards with 26 speed, almost every single time the opponent is going to be forcing an engagement that is going to be desirable for them. So therefore we have to really take into consideration build setup and positioning. It is very, very important and can almost dictate winning and losing from the beginning. So faction considerations, some things we have to think about when we're making our build and the style of play we'd like to use is, for example, do they have artillery? Are they going to try and out-artillery us and try and force us to go forward and attack them instead? What type of range units do they have as well? So, for example, do they have enough range that they can take out our Air Force? Do they have chariots, which are normally very good and generally the bane here of the Dowie? Can they run over our front lines, get into the back and really get into that honey jar there where they can shut down thunderers, shut down cannons, all of these amazing tools that the Dwarfs have. And also spells. So area of effect damage spells have been certainly buffed here due to a couple of glitches in the new meta. So for example, something as cheap as Flock of Doom can do truckloads of damage here up against the Dwarfs with their nicely tight builds. So we also have to take into account map considerations. So for example, is the terrain hilly? Now this is really important because not only can it hide certain units from your opponent when they're going towards you, it can also force different firing angles. So for example, if you have thunderers that fire straight, if you've got a big hill in front of you, of course your thunderers, although they're fast and they fire very straight and they generally have good armor piercing, they're not really going to be hitting much because unfortunately there's a ginormous hill in the way. Whereas if you take into factor, say, quarrelers, they have a good, nice angle which can go over hills, but it is a little bit slower. So these are certain elements we have to take into consideration when creating our builds. Another one as well is water. Now this one isn't so much, or isn't quite so important. It's only really important for Vanguard and Rush builds. So for example, there are certain units that get bonuses. They're called aquatic. They certainly have some good bonus melee stats, or they don't get any negatives when fighting in water. It can also slow down the Dowie, and then that Rush and that Vanguard, when you're really trying to surprise your opponent, become a little bit less surprising because you're so slow. So what we're going to do here is we're going to move into some maps. I'm going to give you 2 different examples, one that's very heavily artillery focused and then one that can really sort of pull away from the artillery focus, something that can really prevent you from using such a build. So we're going to start here on the MP Crossroads. So for any of you that play a lot of multiplayer, you'll know exactly what this map is all about. And to begin with, we're going to start with the artillery focused build. So as you can see here, we have 3 different types of cannons, a good front line, and so we have some thunderers in the pockets as well. Okay, so as you can see here, we're going to be on the MP Crossroads. Now this is a phenomenally flat map. As we can see, there's going to be no trees, no water, and no hilly terrain. This is actually the flattest map here on the multiplayer, but as we can see, this is going to be very good for the artillery. As for the Dwarfs here in the Total War Warhammer 2, currently they have the best and most accurate artillery that there is offered. So as we can see, we have a little bit of a build here. So this is going to be the artillery focused build. We have 2 units of slayers on each side for a little bit of added speed. You can see they have 40 speed, so they're very mobile for the Dwarfs. In the back, we're also going to have some Dwarf warriors protecting up against the 3 cannons. Now they're going to be focusing down, let's say we're up against the lizardmen. They're going to be focusing down big dinosaurs, lords, and also heroes. And here in the middle, we are going to have some thunderers. They're going to be protected by this little box we have here. We have some blasting charges in the front to deal with all that cheap and cheerful chaff. And then we have some Dwarf warriors on the outside with that extra added melee defense just to hold. And the focus of this build is to use your lord here, which is going to be Thoric Ironbrow. He will be having some runes, which is the rune of speed and also the rune of slowness. And also here you'll have the Master Engineer. He will have his Flash Bomb for slows. And the way we're going to force the engagements that we want is we're going to be slowing down what we don't want to fight against and basically shooting it. So we have our 2 Thunderers that we can move around, the Master Engineer can shoot, and we also have 4 cannons. So let's say we have a Dreadosaurian coming straight down the pocket, I can flash bomb it, or use the Rune of Slowness to slow it down, and then put all 3 of my cannons onto it. And that would be a good way here of using the artillery focus, which is going to benefit us most here on the map. It's nice and flat. There's nothing here to obstruct the cannons, which generally fire rather straight. So here, which is very nice, we can get probably maximum value from them as long as we can keep them back. So here, you'd want to push your army forward when they start progressing towards you. Get as much distance between them and your cannons as possible to give you as much time to get you as much value, but not too far that you're going to start leaving pockets open. So for example here you can see the Dwarfs are very slow, so having pockets of this size can be quite difficult. You'll see a lot of players move it like this, and so they can sort of protect the pocket as much as possible. Now here what's going to be difficult is as the Dwarfs, once the honey jar is open, it's almost impossible to shut again. So once they're inside and they're all over your range units, it's almost impossible to get them out without breaking them or killing them. So it's very, very difficult, and once they've stopped your range from shooting, it is very difficult to get it back online. So these are certain things you have to take into consideration, and this is another map here, and something I would advise for all of you here, because we'll go into a second map with a different example with a different army setup, is make sure you consider all the maps and you've gone into them prior, so you have an understanding of what map you're going to be playing on and what army you're going to get the most value from. So here this is going to be a very artillery focused map where you can get almost all 440 meters of range, as you can see. You're going to be getting some very, very good value here. So we'll go through to the next build here, and the next build is going to be a little bit more focused on box builds, onion builds, and slow pushes. So if we load here, we'll see we'll have our onion and slow push with the box. And we'll be moving on to another map here, which is going to be the MP Ipown Ridge. Now, we don't see Crossroads almost at all because it's a little bit unfair for certain factions. But here, MP Ipown Ridge is seen quite a bit, and you'll see why. Okay, so we're on to our second map here, which is going to be MP Ipown Ridge. And as you can see, we have this ginormous ridge in front of us. You can see how tall the Dowie are, and then you can see this ginormous ridge here in the middle. Now, as you can already see, this probably wouldn't be a very heavily artillery focused, and the reason is because unfortunately, having to try and shoot over this hill can be a bit of a pain. Now, you can use other things, so you can use catapults. They're very good indeed. They can shoot over, but here, if your enemy is on the other side, visibility is going to be a problem, and to fulfill the attacking rule, you actually have to be engaged at all times. And if your artillery can't see and engage, unfortunately, you're not fulfilling the attacking rule, therefore you're breaking the rules. Which is why a little bit of a build like this, this is going to be the first build. This is going to be a little bit of a box build. Now, as you can see, the flanks here are secure, the back is secure, and the front is secure. We have blasting charges in the front. We have some longbeards in behind, so we can also aid. We could even put the longbeards a little bit forward if we wanted to, so we can have blasting charges over the top, whilst the longbeards take the brunt of the charge. On the flanks, we have some dwarf warriors here, and some longbeards, just mixing in and protecting the ginormous range in the middle. This can be used as a box build or even here as a slow push. Now, what I mean as a slow push is you would grab this force like so, and you would slowly advance towards your opponent. And what you try and do is you try and overwhelm them with the amount of range in the pocket, and you just try and hold and use the blasting charges through as much chaff as possible, and you basically just try to overwhelm them with numbers and the amount of fire you've got. So therefore, as we can't see our opponent, we would have to push here. Artillery wouldn't be so great in this scenario unless we had other things like gyrocopters that could see and obtain us visibility. That's the only other way, but of course then you're going to be having lots of money there into artillery pieces and also gyrocopters, and not so much to hold the front line and also do the dirty work you need so that your artillery pieces can get their value.
I keep my oaths. Miners! Quarrelers! War of vengeance! Valea bless our aim! For the Karazangor! Thunderers! Kill the earth splitters! Longbeards! Slayers! quarrelers! For the ancestors! Yes, Lord! Dwarf warriors! Let the vengeance begin! For the Karazhan Corps! Descendant of Lorn!
So here, as we can see, we're now going to be coming with the second build, which is going to be the Onion. So the very same force on the same map here, but as you can see, there's going to be a few different layers. The front layer is going to be the miners with the blasting charges. Then on the second layer, we're going to be having the Thunderers, a nice pocket of range. But then in between those here, we'll be having the Longbeards. Now, Longbeards is going to create another good section here where you can protect your quarrels in the back. Now, I know this might not be an optimal setup with Thunderers in the front and quarrels in the back. It's entirely up to you how you want to set this up. But for this example, you can see there's going to be multiple layers here for multiple different levels of range, and also we have the mobile slayers in the back. On the flanks, we have the Longbeards and the Dwarf Warriors as well, to really help protect this pocket. And what this allows here, so with the box build, one of the weaknesses is if you get through any one side, so let's say we overwhelm the miners and the Dwarf Warriors here in this corner, we can then push through and then we're into the cookie jar for everything. Whilst if they now get through into the front line, the only 3 units they get onto is the Thunderers, whilst the Quarrelers here can still keep firing. Now, under consideration, there's a few of us YouTubers that believe that, I'm one of those as well, that thinks that the Onion build is probably the most competitive build here. An Onion push is probably the most competitive build here for the Dwarfs in the current meta. There are other very unique builds, but when you play with the Dwarfs, you're generally all in or nothing. You can't really go half on one type or half on the other. It's not generally how it works for the Dwarfs, unfortunately. Considering how many strong weaknesses they've got, you really have to go with one idea, and hopefully it pays off. But here, this is a particular build that you can see. You can optimize it, you can make it a little bit more efficient, but this is a particular build you can see from the Dwarfs with the Onion. So that's going to cover the Onion, the slow push, and the box builds, and we've also covered artillery focus. So next here, we will be looking at Vanguard Rush. Okay, so this here is going to be an example of a Vanguard Rush build, or both here, and what we can do is we can pop onto a different map. Let's go on to, I think Estilian Tomb can be quite a nice example. Okay, so this is a Vanguard or a Rush build. Now you can define it how you like depending on the particular playstyle you'd like to more push towards, but both are relatively similar. And as you can see here, we have 4 units of Slayers in the back, along with Ungrim and the Runesmith. Now, these cannot, unfortunately, Vanguard, but what they can do is they're a little bit faster here than the rest of the units. We have 28 speed here from the Miners, and the slowest is going to be 32 here for the Runesmith and Ungrim. But Slayers will be having 40 speed, so they should be able to catch up relatively quickly. And for the Vanguard element, we can see here we have some Rangers on the back corners. We can also Vanguard some Miners with them as well for a little bit of protection if we like. But another sneaky unit is going to be the Norgrimling Ironbreakers. Now, this is a unit here that people don't always know has Vanguard, but it's a nice elite unit that you can push forward here with the blasting charges. Now, because they no longer count as range, you can almost bring as much range as you want here with the Dowie. But you've got lots of Miners that are very close, ready to go. You've got some Rangers in behind to shoot. You've got your Slayers coming in very quickly behind as well. And you're going to have your 2 Rangers that can get some nice sneaky pokes from behind. So this here is a good example on a small map that you could utilize a Vanguard build to really take your opponent off guard, as it's something you really wouldn't expect from the Dowie. Most Dowie players are expected to be in a nice heavy box, artillery focused, and forcing their opponent to come towards them. So this is a good build here you can bring that could really take your opponents by surprise. So when you are going through your Dwarfs, make sure you know which one of these have the Vanguard ability, like the Norgrimling Ironbreakers. You also have Rangers, Bugman Rangers, Rangers with great weapons. You're going to have a variety of tools here that you can use. Also here, Slayers, although they can't Vanguard, they're still going to catch up very quickly. Gives you that anti-large as well, which can be very handy. And it means when the front line does punch, get your blasting charges off, your Slayers should be ready to get round the flanks, a little bit like cavalry, and consume your opponent. Okay, so we're going to go to our final build here, which is going to be the Royal Dowie Air Force. Now this here, as you can see, is focused on some very expensive gyrocopter brimstone guns and the double gyro bombers. We also have the Sky Hammer and a small elite force pocket. I'll explain why. So we're going to go on to MP Ipown Ridge, which I think is a good example here. Okay, so we've moved back now to MP Ipown Ridge, and this is where we can start using the mobility of the gyrocopters. Now, they are in the air, which means if all force units on the floor do go, or they do break or shatter, or they go off the edge of the map, whatever it may be, unfortunately, they'll start taking leadership penalties for being the only units. So just to make sure that you can't just sky cheese until the end of the game. But as we can see here, we have a nice little box in the back corner. This box needs to hold for a very long period of time, so there's no point putting it forward. You need to make sure that it holds for as long as it possibly can, so you get the maximum value here out of your brimstone guns and out of your gyro bombers. Now, these guys are going to run together. Now, this is very easily countered, but if it's not prepared for, they are very, very durable. 90 speed is the slowest with 100 armor. And as you can see, we're going to be having 105 here for the brimstone gun. So they're very quick, anti-large, fire damage, armor piercing, also a ginormous 1,509 missile strength, and that's slow ability. So it slows it by 35% with that suppressed, which means if you do have 2 gyro bombers, if you have something that's flying at you, say 90 speed is trying to catch you, you could shoot it with one, drop with the other, turn around and shoot as they both drop. So you just get this double dropping ability here, and it is really quite effective. So you would have one like this, one like this. This one would be shooting whilst this one drops back. This one would start shooting whilst this one drops back, and so on and so forth, while you have the rest of these trying to shoot. And the best thing you can do is try and make sure and you just keep them all together. You fight what you need to fight quickly, so you get rid of all the fast units so they can't come and take out your infantry on the floor, and then you just try and take out the rest. And it's going to be very good against Tomb Kings, as you got anti-large and fire damage for your brimstone guns. Very good against Lords, Heroes, big monsters. I've seen this very successfully against Tomb Kings, Greenskins, Chaos. There are quite a few factions that if they're not well prepared, they can really, really struggle. This is where our faction considerations comes in. For example, what do they have to deal with these flying units? So, for example, if we play Dark Elves, they have lots of anti-large missiles, and they have lots of armor-piercing missiles that can really deal big damage. They also have Harpies that fly. They also have all these exceptional tools, such as Marathi in the Sky as well. So the big factors you have to take into consideration, and if we also take into account, for example, Chaos, they do have Marauder throwing axes. Their javelins aren't so great at taking out sky units. They do have Manticores as well. Spirit Leech is very decent up against gyrocopters as well. So there are certain things you do have to take into consideration when you are playing this build. For example, you have to be very sharp onto what is my biggest threat, and I must take that out first. So if you take out all the ranged units, amazing. Nothing can touch you except magic. Once you've taken out the magic, there is nothing that they can do to deal with this force. And then once they've recognized that, they have to remove your ground force. If they can't do that in the time, which is why it's nice and early, it should hold. You have unbreakable units on the floor with your Dragonback Slayers and Giant Slayers. You also have the Peak Gate Guard that have immune to Psychology, Nor Grimling Ironbreakers. You can take loads of Ironbreakers as well, blasting charges to remove chaff. We've got Thoric here, who's going to come with Rune of Speed, Rune of Slowness. Is really going to aid in those battles. And yeah, invariably that's the tactic. The tactic is to take your opponent unaware, try and use mobility in the sky, which you rarely see here from the Dowie. It's a little bit like the Vanguard and the Rush build. It's a bit of a surprise element, but unfortunately if it is built for, it can be countered relatively hard. Now, if it is, what you can do, if you have lots of range or you have lots of mobility or spells such as Tempest, you can drop them, you can start bringing your force forward, drop your gyros behind them, have them fight and distract your opponent, and then try and pick apart elements where and if you can. You do have a massive amount of mobility with 105 speed, so there are certain things that you also can try and do. For example, try and maneuver yourself around your opponent with a little bit higher speed and see if you can pick off units that have been left behind. And also you have these amazing abilities with the gyro bombs. Now, bombs are very good for anti-infantry, so you can also remove them using your anti-large shots and then bomb all the infantry. You have 11 bombs here for your gyro bomber, and for the RRH, you have 5 ginormous Skyhammer bombs. They're exceptional large strikes. They're just incredible at removing chaff. So you're going to be having at least 16 of the large bombs, and then you'll be having 6 here from the gyro bombers. So as long as you keep all the models alive here, you get all the bombs off, you get all your shots off, you invariably should win the day. So as we can see here, that's going to be 8 builds that you guys can use in the multiplayer scene. So maybe you should go ahead, and this is my advice, go check out all the maps. I will be leaving a map pool on my Discord, so feel free to join up there. You'll be able to see all of the amazing things that I have already on offer, where you can practice all of these elements as well. A very active scene here for the multiplayer, and you'll be able to see all the maps. Go check them all out and see what builds are going to work here of the 8 that I've shown forward, whether you take a box build, an onion, or a slow push, or there's a combination of those. You can either take a rush or a vanguard, artillery focus, or you can take a Dowie air force. Go check out other factions, think what these builds might do best against, what maps they're going to do well on. So for example, even though this is a good army against Tomb Kings, it's not going to be the best army on every single map. So there are many considerations here to take into account, and there's going to be more videos coming forward to really try and help you decide what sort of builds you should bring. It will take into consideration maps, factions, and you'll be having specific, let's say, Dwarfs versus Tomb Kings. What armies can you bring on what maps, and where you're going to get your most advantages. So we'll be having videos like that coming forward in the future. And if that's something you would like to see, or you have any specific questions, feel free to jump onto the Discord, put down some things you'd like to vote on that you could see in the future for the Dowie. But other than that, I've been your boy Logic. If you really enjoyed this, please smash that like button. Drop a comment down below about what you thought about this series so far. Also, if you are new here, please feel free to subscribe. It really would help here as I'm trying to grow as a YouTuber. You can drop down, as I said, into the description and find my Discord, Twitch, all the other great things that you can try and join and be a part of here for my community. And other than that, take care of yourself during these times, and I'll see you during the next video or live stream.